All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking a fascinating 2023 paper by researchers Sergio da Silva and Raul Matsushita. They've essentially taken an absolute mountain of data, reports covering roughly 92% of all bird species on Earth, and uncovered this hidden mathematical architecture governing the skies. Get ready, because the way nature organizes itself is brilliantly structured, but as you'll see, it's also terrifyingly fragile. To really set the stage here, picture all the birds on the planet. Researchers estimate we're talking about 50 billion individual birds flying, nesting, and singing across the globe. That massive population is spread out across roughly 9,700 different species. But here's the wild part. Out of all that incredible diversity, there are exactly just four, undomesticated species that completely dominate the entire world avian population.
When you actually visualize this data, the sheer contrast is honestly mind-blowing. You've got this massive foundation representing over 5,000 distinct species, but each of those species has fewer than 500,000 individual birds. And that massive block of diversity? It is totally dwarfed by the tiny fraction at the very top, representing billions of birds concentrated in just a handful of species. It's a really striking picture of extreme biological inequality.
So who exactly is in this elite billionaire club of the skies? Well, it boils down to house sparrows, European starlings, ring-billed gulls, and barn swallows. These four specific species hold an unimaginable amount of population wealth compared to the rest of the flock. While thousands of other species are just kind of scraping by in small niche habitats, these four are thriving on a scale of literally billions.
Section 1. Math governing the flock. So how do we make sense of this? To uncover the invisible rules dictating this massive inequality, scientists use something called the Pareto distribution. Think of it kind of like the rule governing human wealth inequality, the whole 1% idea. A Pareto distribution is a power law. It perfectly explains how a very small number of species can hoard massive populations, creating what statisticians call a long tail. Now, historically, ecologists would use a different model called a log-normal distribution to track species abundance. But there's a catch. A log-normal distribution expects way fewer extremes. If we use that old model, we'd actually expect about 200 more bird species in the middle range than actually exist. The Pareto model is just far more robust here because it actually accounts for those billionaire outliers without throwing the whole ecological equation out of whack. It respects the extreme outliers of nature.
Section 2. 3 tiers of abundance.
When researchers mapped out exactly where every single bird species stands in the hierarchy, it was like a giant puzzle falling into place. By plotting population rank against actual abundance, 3 clear mathematical power laws emerge. First up, we have our billionaires at the very top. Mathematically, they're characterized by having the shortest tails in the data distribution. They are distinct, stable, and astronomically numerous. Just below them is the abundant middle class, about 546 species. Now, these birds have an expected abundance value, meaning we can generally predict their numbers. However, the math shows they lack clear variability. In ecological terms, that means this middle class is highly vulnerable to sudden hierarchical adjustments. Basically, one bad environmental shift, and they could easily swap places or plummet. And then we hit this steep cliff. This represents 89 extremely rare species sitting in a high uncertainty zone. Their mathematical tail is so heavy that they literally lack a stable expected population value. They are teetering right on the verge of extinction, existing in this non-equilibrium state where they might just vanish completely. Section 3. The paradox of abundance. Now, you might be thinking, okay, if there are billions of these top 4 birds, they've got to be totally safe from the extinction threats faced by the rare ones, right? If there are a billion of you, how could you possibly be wiped out? But the history of biology and the data in this study tell a much more alarming story. Abundance absolutely does not equal immortality. Surprisingly, highly abundant species are super vulnerable to 3 specific threats. First, habitat dependence. Think of the highly abundant monarch butterfly facing catastrophic declines simply because milkweed is being destroyed. Second, overexploitation. Just look at the passenger pigeon. It was once the most abundant bird in North America, literally blackening the skies, and it was entirely hunted to extinction in the early 20th century. And third, climate change, which can rapidly destroy vast populations, much like warming waters are wiping out incredibly abundant coral reefs right now. Section 4. The ecological domino effect.
So, what happens to the rest of the ecosystem's math if the unthinkable occurs and those top 4 abundant species actually do go extinct? Well, researchers ran a simulation gradually removing them, and it turns into pure chaos. The math wildly oscillates back and forth. The baseline stability is just completely shattered as the billionaires are removed.
To put it simply, if those billionaire birds fall, the invisible math that stabilizes the entire global flock breaks down. The Pareto distribution literally loses its variance and eventually its mean. It leaves every other species in a state of extreme ecological uncertainty. The whole system loses its anchor.
And this isn't just theoretical math. Out in the real world, this causes a terrifying domino effect. The extinction of key stabilizing species makes ecosystems highly susceptible to invasive, non-native species. We also see what researchers call homogenization, especially in our cities, where unique local bird communities are completely replaced by the exact same handful of species you see in every other city on Earth. So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to challenge how you view our environment. We often look at a massive flock of sparrows or starlings and think of them as permanent, unbreakable fixtures of the landscape. But as this explainer shows, understanding these hidden statistical rules might just be the key to saving our biodiversity. Because if the math proves that the billionaires of the sky can fall and take the entire ecosystem down with them, it means that in nature, no one is truly safe unless the whole system is in balance.